All right, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing time so far. Our next panel is titled Conversational AI and Personalization. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage.
Hey everyone, really excited to be here with this amazing crew of a panel. And we are looking forward to some engaging conversation around the topic of conversational AI and personalization. I'm super excited about this panel with very diverse opinions. I feel each of us have very different backgrounds and really excited to exchange stories about what we have seen in the industry. And with that, I'll get started with introductions. So I guess I can go first, and we'll hand it over to each of the panelists in turn. So I myself, Sunanda Parthasarathy, and I lead pharmacy personalization or retail pharmacy consumer analytics within CVS, and where we and like my data science teams build models that really help us talk to each patient with that one-on-one personalization goal, right? So we build models that really help us understand how to talk to each of them, what channel, what timing, what cadence, what is the right product to offer them, etc. And the high-level goal of doing all of this is, of course, making sure we are not just your neighborhood prescription filler, but more of a healthcare partner and help you be adherent, get good health outcomes. And before this, I've been with Wayfair, building similar data science teams that worked on core personalization and recommendation for all of its e-commerce pages and brands. And before that, I was with an ad tech startup, again, data science, machine learning, AI being the core, building models that really helped us fine tune each of the advertising campaigns the startup was designing for its clients. My technical background is actually in physics, and I decided to move into the glamorous world of data science when that opportunity came up. And I'm really enjoying the ride so far. With that, I would like to hand it over to our next panelist. Let's go with you, Roland, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Absolutely. Roland Gossage. I'm the CEO and founder of GroupBy. GroupBy is a product discovery platform that is powered by Google's retail AI. My background, I actually started in the networking side. This is back in the, before Ethernet, token ring and stuff of that nature. And graduated into big data before we called it big data. This is traditional original BI in a company called Cognos. I then progressed into a company called Endeca, which pioneered a lot of the things in retail that everybody's used to seeing today. Obviously, their largest claim to fame was guided navigation, which is pretty much table stakes these days for any e-commerce website. After that, I actually started GroupBy, and in conjunction with Google from day one in 2013, we were building the next product discovery platform, obviously with a very heavy-handed piece on search and user experience.
Thank you so much. And we'll move on to Sanjiv.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sanjay Karani, and I lead Kroger's platform products and ecosystems innovation. At Kroger, our purpose is to feed the human spirit. We are called America's grocer, and our close to 500,000 associates provide food uplift to over 11 million customers on a daily basis. As an omnichannel retailer and top 10 e-commerce company, we are leading the change and innovation in e-commerce, AI, data and analytics, automated warehouses, smart shelves, smart carts, autonomous vehicles, and drone delivery, to name the few. Under Kroger Technology and Digital, my platform innovation area covers over 30 product-centric teams, ranging from search, monetization, APIs, application platform, behavior data analytics, test and learn, design systems, identity and access management, all supporting Kroger's seamless ecosystem. It's a pleasure meeting you all.
Thank you so much, Sanjiv. I am really looking forward to some conversations based on the very differing kind of, but still all connected to the personalization theme that Roland and you have shared so far. And last but not least, want to have Pavel introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pavel Sanoval, and I lead, I'm a senior technical product marketing manager at Nylas, and I lead the commercialization and marketing for new AI services across our communications platform. We're a Series C startup backed by Tiger Global Management, and we really focus on three core pillars, which is customer data, personalization, and customer engagement, really to provide a unified digital transformation for industry-specific customers, in particular retail, and across verticals as well. Prior to that, I worked at Google Cloud. I was helping lead a lot of the new innovative emerging NLP use cases across industries within retail and media entertainment. I helped launch Google Cloud Los Angeles region in 2018. Prior to that, I worked at Disney Parks Experiences and Consumer Products, very early days in 2015 on their My Magic Plus initiative, which was a $1 billion initiative to drive digital transformation across all service lines, migrating to a digital first experience. So yeah, very excited to chat with you all and get to converse more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. As I mentioned already, really excited to get the show on and pretty much get the party started. So Patricia, if you want to flash the opening conversation we want to have. So I think I want to start this conversation with, like, if you want to say the elephant in the room, right? There is obviously a lot of focus from retailers around creating personalized experience, right? And as we go across the board, no matter what kind of retailer they are, there's been a huge focus in the recent years. And I think we each have our window into that giant ecosystem of what we think personalization means in retail and where we think it can actually really deliver value and sort of like our standard, tried and tested methods of if you wanted to build personalization for a retail vertical, how do we start from scratch, right? So with that context, we'll want to get to hear some of your ways in which you have approached this in your journey. Maybe we start with you, Pavel, and then we'll be curious to hear Sanjiv and Roland's thoughts as well.
Yes, I know, definitely. I agree. I think we'll probably all take a very different stance at it because the personalization can be very broad. I think I'll take it from a very particular stance. I think for in my experience for personalization in retail, there's been a lot. I view it really from driving customer engagement across the life cycle. And so, in the last couple of years, there's been a very, big change in privacy and tracking changes across from Apple's, app tracking transparency, Google's cookie deprecation. And so, a lot of retailers have traditionally relied on, paid advertising to drive, re-engagement, targeting, acquisition, and a lot of those costs have really skyrocketed over the last couple of years. And so brands are really now faced with the challenge of how do I engage my users across the life cycle without having to leverage, paid digital advertising as much for re-engagement. And so really, I see delivering value is how do I, naturally and organically engage shoppers once they've reached, your mobile application, once they've signed in. And so really, from an approach perspective, how I view with a lot of retailers and even my past experience has really kind of centered around kind of three main pillars. One of them, the first is really, governance. So, especially with a lot of, that privacy and tracking, there's been a lot of, surveillance overreach, right? Which is probably limited, Apple and Google to kind of take a step back, which has kind of drove in a first party data approach, right? And so making sure that at least, in my experience, that if customers are going to share their data, they understand what the experience that they're going to get. And this kind of ties into my second pillar, which is really around customer, identity. Currently even at Nylas right now, we, when we connect, let's say a consumer's inbox with their retail information, we always, want the consumer to grant access in terms of and making sure that we're highlighting the benefits of, hey, if we extract order shipping information, you'll be able to auto populate this information for account management purposes. So you really understand that the benefit that you're immediately getting, and it's immediately tied to the consumer itself, right? So if they log in, there's no additional machine learning required to do personalization, right? It's just extracting the right information at the right time. And then this really dives into the third point, which is that relevancy. I view personalization kind of two layers, which one, the first layer of personalization really comes down to presenting the right information at the right time for the consumer, right? Consumers have to, especially across their shopping journey, have to bounce back and forth through a lot. And so if you're able to solve those challenges, presenting the right information at the right time, then you can leverage a lot of the first party data to drive additional machine learning, right? Whether it's, personalization, forecasting, et cetera. So, but yeah, so that, that's kind of view kind of those three pillars. And, again, really addressing a lot of, business problems, which is, again, that shifting digital marketing landscape, increasing customer engagement costs.
Yeah, that's a very interesting angle in terms of like, why should retailers be thinking about it? Like in general, there's also this FOMO, right? Like everybody's talking about personalization. So a retailer is like, gosh, we need to be personalizing things without real context of where am I going to get value out of it? And I think that's a great point you made around think of it as your individual mechanism by which you engage your customers and not having to depend purely on digital marketing, right, to deliver that engagement. And I think that's a great point. And then you connected it pretty brilliantly to like start developing your first party data. Like that's crucial given the climate we are in terms of security and governance. That is your worth weight in gold, right? And it gives you that bond and trusting partnership with your customers, because you can then tell them very transparently what it's going to be used for. You're not dependent on third-party folks to like in terms of the customer's data usage. So really love that viewpoint. And I think I want to add a few other things, but I'll hold off towards the end. And I want to move it over to Sanjiv, especially it's fascinating. Like one of the piece that Pavel mentioned was about how it's important to build that relationship with the customer, right? And you being part of a giant that we all know, like how does Kroger or like you think about personalization in terms of where it can add value? And we'll be very interested to learn how Kroger has approached this, right, from in terms of building up its stack.
Yeah. So before I get to Kroger and my point of view, I do want to highlight some industry, the stats related to why personalization matters. According to McKinsey, which just published, I think about a few months ago, the research, personalization in retail, where they talked about personalization is a force multiplier and absolute critical business necessity. A few points to elaborate on those. Consumers do not just want personalization, they demand it. According to research, 71% of consumers expect company to deliver personalized interaction, and 76% get frustrated when that doesn't happen. With store and product loyalty more elusive, getting it right matters. Roughly 75% consumer tried a new shopping behavior in last 18 months, and more than 80% those intend to continue with new behavior. Finally, companies that excel at personalization generate 40% more revenue than average players. Across US industry, shifting to top quartile performance in personalization would generate over $1 trillion in value creation. So kind of giving this industry perspective, let me get to like how Kroger and I think about personalization. At Kroger, personalization is one of our 4 key strategic modes that differentiate us in areas that are important to our customer. We serve up billions of personalized interactions that is primarily based on our relevancy science that actually looks at the entire end-to-end digital shopping journey and ensuring we are delivering products and offer recommendation that at the end of the day save customer time and money. This personalization in turn actually creates value for our customers and drives loyalty. I'll give you one quick example. Search and Start My Cart drives almost 70% of our customer add to cart from an e-commerce perspective. So embedding the notion of personalization that looks at optimal product recommendation based on customer past purchases, nutritional value. Kroger actually has an entire data science related to the healthy product. We call it our opt-up score. Typical spend budget, like how the customer lifetime value, right? Like how are they spending? Brand affinity, dietary health restrictions, any kind of likes, dislike. So all of these are like the ingredient that actually goes into what is the type of like the assortment we should put in front of our customers, the price, the recommendations, and all that. And yeah, I would say we only scratch the surface related to the art of possible. Leveraging AI, machine learning. Kroger also owns the entire data science company called Ai4. So we got basically hundreds of data scientists that are constantly looking at the ways, various sciences to really solve, right? Like how do we make right and relevant experiences for our customers at the right moment in the right context?
Yeah, so true. Those any retailer wondering if they should be doing personalization, I think you basically laid it out for them in terms of the stats, right? It's very, very obvious. And I think that those kind of studies are probably what's egging on people. And I think what we hope to provide as part of this panel is our different viewpoints on how folks can get on the bandwagon, for lack of a better term. Want to pass it on to Roland, if you could share your inputs on this theme.
Yeah, I think all the comments that everybody said summarized a lot of the reasons of why we need to do it, why everybody's chasing this. I'll sort of, to make it sort of short and sweet so we can continue on. The important things is there's important building blocks. And I know that CVS and Kroger have done this because I do know their organizations. A lot of people who are way behind where you guys as organizations that are just looking through the the shop window and trying to figure this out. One of the important things to keep in mind is that you have to start with a solid foundation, right? Your first party data, making sure that you've got it aligned, making sure that you know where your data stores are and what you have access to for that information that you're going to need for personalization. The one thing that AI and machine learning and all this stuff needs is a lot of information and a lot of accurate information, because if you get that wrong, it actually ends up really bad in the end versus really good. So planning, foresight, making sure you're picking the right partners, that you're seeking your peers, people on this panel, reaching out to them and seeing if you can share some insights and stuff like that. I'd recommend to a lot of the companies that are early in their journey. For us, obviously, we're partnered with Google. They have very large machine learning teams. So do we. We try to democratize machine learning so that it's not so scary and big, especially for organizations that don't maybe have teams of hundreds of machine learning people. But the idea is that there is a way to step into this and lower your risk, but just make sure that you're going to need to get those building blocks, like developing personalization in, say, search. If you don't have relevancy first, I'm going to personalize the wrong thing because I don't have that at the core. So just something to keep in mind for those venturing now into the waters of personalization.
Yes, great advice, Roland. I think especially in terms of like focusing on the basics, right? We don't have don't run before you learn to crawl. Get the basics right, get the data, because otherwise it's going to be garbage in, garbage out, and you really can't personalize, and it can backfire because you will end up creating very frictionated or very unnerving experiences for the customers, and they will actually lose faith in the brand and the company. So I think those are very, very good points, and really segues well into the other themes we want to touch. So I'm not going to touch on them now, but essentially some of the points that you guys mentioned around what do we need, what are the low-hanging fruits, I want to come back to it. And before we jump into the other question, very quickly, I want to just wrap it up. I think the summary of it would be, folks need, where can add value, I think there is a defensive case for it, meaning like everybody's expecting it. Your average consumer is expecting you to be talking to them in a personal way, not in a tone deaf way, right? Like really relating to them. So there is a defensive business case. And then the more in the aggressive side of the business case would be this can really be like the moat that Sanjiv mentioned. This can really differentiate because the way you as a brand talk to your customer will be very different from another brand. And that is the relationship you want to develop, right? So it's both a proactive and a defensive case in my mind. We could segue into the next question now, and I think it ties some of the themes that the speakers highlighted here. One of the nuggets about personalization that is pretty hot these days is conversational AI, right? The way we see it in one of the main toolkits, if you will, for retailers and businesses is figuring out how to get a conversational AI product out there. So I'm curious to hear the panelists' thoughts on where do you see its relevance in retail, right? And again, similar to the overall theme of personalization, where exactly do you see it being applied for the maximum ROI in terms of the value it delivers? And again, would very much like to know from you guys' experience, how should the businesses be thinking about launching a product like that? And I want to start with you, Roland, because you had started on some of these themes. It'll be good to continue that conversation on like expanding into conversational AI. You are on mute, Roland, I think.
Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, so I want to start to talk about that. I think there's value in it for sure. This is one that is still fairly new. I've used a lot of people's from telecommunication company, a lot of like personal use on it. I have not seen it done well yet. It is still seems like it's going through a script as if you're in a call center and they're just reading through a script and can't come off it and use their own mind. Now, the technology is there. And so I think that it will accelerate rather fast, especially because people are talking about conversational AI. And I think the use in retail is really, really good. I don't want to talk to a representative. I want to kind of have a chat. I want it to actually be smart enough to get me what I need. And so you think in a retail example, I type in something like returns, it should take me to the return page. But if I say, hey, I'm looking for a little black dress, good for a first date, it should say, hey, here are some products that we recommend. And by the way, all that personalization, all those other things we just talked about should be feeding into that, right? So the infrastructure that we've built up to get to the conversational AI should already be in place to be able to fill that system. So that's something that actually we have on a roadmap and it's kind of in our labs, but we want to make sure that we get it right, because every experience that I've had has been subpar. We don't want to be the next one in line of doing that. But a lot of smart people thinking about this, but I think the value is pretty tremendous. I call it like the private shopper online, and you can service all your clients with a single personal shopper for the cost of one application.
Yeah, I think that is like, to me, that's the beauty of conversational AI, like the whole technology for retail specifically, because I feel the origin of that started somewhere in that help center, right? It was always like, it was focused more on reducing the cost of like operations from a call center perspective, right? Like, let's automate that. Let's get somebody answering most of the calls. But I think the technology itself, to your point, has bloomed, but it still needs to prove its value in real life. Because it can be, there are niche where it has worked well as a personalized shopping recommender, like, helping you figure out what your style is, what your what you need. In some cases, it's still stuck in the regime purely of tell me your problem, I'll try to hash out a ticket for you kind of a situation. So I think there is still room to grow. And again, I'll add more thoughts, but want to pass it over to...
Also for CVS and Kroger, you guys have complex problems. In other words, if you get certain things wrong and recommend in that thing, the incorrect thing, if you think about pharmacy, which you're in, or just even in the vitamins aisle, you can have lawsuits. So this is a thing that you have to be extra careful for a lot of organization. If you're just selling dresses and t-shirts, different problems. But I think some of the organizations that we work with, we get into a whole legal issues that we have to talk around having these things, because as we know, the machines can actually go a little awry, and that can create legal stuff as well. So it's a big topic, but let's turn it over to some of the other panelists.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, which is what I wanted to come back to, because coming from e-commerce, like I used to be at Wayfair, and then coming to CVS, that was the big difference, right? Like, okay, if my algorithms did bad, like we're not performing great, and I recommended like the second best sofa ahead of the first best sofa, no big deal. Nobody's going to die. But if it's a whole different ball game if we are doing something similar within the pharmaceutical industry, within like CVS pharmacy. So I think I go back to your earlier thought about like, go slow, but go steady, right? Like make the pieces in succession. And I can share a few more ways in which we personally have tried to handle it at CVS after we hear some more diverse opinions. So on to you, Pavel, and then to Sanjiv.
Oh, yes, of course. So, the way I would say I view is, conversational AI is really only as valuable as the contextualized data that the chatbot has to source from. I feel like the challenge really in this space isn't really the accurate like natural language processing, but how the actual chatbot responds. And so this is probably drawing a lot more from when I was at Google, but a common challenge that I saw a lot of customers when they were trying to orchestrate like dialogue flow chatbots, which is like our managed chatbot service, was the lack of personalization of customer queries because they didn't have the first party data required. And so, that typically means, acquiring order, shipping, historical purchase data across vendors and partners. And I found that the three main use cases that centered were really around initiating returns, as Roland had mentioned, order status, and upsell when there's out of stock situations. And so each of those three things I'll tie into a specific thing. So returns tend to be, retailers' biggest margin erosion. And so a lot of that is about, how do you, especially, depending on what sector of retail with low margins, right? It's the biggest boost to your bottom line. Order status, I think, as you also has mentioned, right, tends to be more that contact center. How do we create operational efficiency? The last one with out of stock, it really is just the opportunity to not lose revenue, right? Especially retailers with a large product catalog. Often if one thing is out of stock, doesn't mean that there's not a similar item that can be presented, right? And so you don't want to lose that opportunity to, drive your order value or, drive that purchase. And so I find that really it comes back to, it's really more of a data question more than, how do I, launch conversational AI, right? It's more about, I think as you had mentioned, how do I go to the basics of like, what is the data that I have that I can leverage? And then a way I can deploy that to drive customer engagement is conversational AI. So.
Yeah, the last thing you want as a retailer is have pop up and the customers go, I don't want you, like end it. I think that's the piece that people should have in mind. Like, how do you broach this in a very tone sensitive way, understand where your customers are in their journey, and then deploy it at the right point in their journey. Eager to hear your thoughts, Sanjiv.
I as a matter of fact, totally agree with Roland and Pavel. As a matter of fact, I think some of the primary use case we see within conversational AI are what are the most tedious and frustrating the customer transaction, right? So think about like, hey, where the heck is my product or package, right? Like the dispute returns management, refunds. I mean, the chatbots, related to some of like more routine transaction. And actually we had limited success of deploying chatbots. So as you know, in the thick of pandemic, the customers, they were not able to either find COVID, like vaccine appointment, like what kind of different tests I need if I need to travel and all that. So we did actually deploy a conversational AI, like a chatbot that actually help people navigate based on, your health condition, based on, I think what you're trying to do to really basically navigate that journey and get them the appointment, get them the testing or whatever. So I would say, we were actually able to not only just think about the use case, but actually deploy this in a live setting, use some of like Microsoft technology to do that. The opportunity and the vision I see is very much to, I think what you were saying, Roland, the notion of like the personalized assistant or a virtual agent, and I'm actually a big fan. I work for Convergence. I do come from that call center background, and I know I think the routine call people get, right? Like, hey, where is this? Where is that? It's like everything is a tunnel vision in terms of there's nothing really put together in a holistic fashion. So when I think of those virtual agents, it's like literally the moment I actually sort of get on a site, the virtual agent now actually comes to the life, right? Like it will take care of, I mean, the stuff you buy all the time, right? Like the cart is, here is a cart, right? Like feel free to make changes, I mean, in terms of what you need. But virtual agent can now also actually do interconnection, right? The cross-pollination. Hey, are you looking recommendation in the area of like food inspiration, meal planning, recipes, like grocery pickup, delivery, milk preparation, eating arrangement, cleaning, all of this in a single sort of like integrated the experience versus having to manually do that, right? One big deal I know that's going on right now is eating healthy on a budget, right? Today, like consumers spend so many hours just trying to figure out, right? Like, is there a coupon available, right? Like I want to eat healthy, but I cannot afford it, right? Like the organic and all that. So again, this virtual agent, they can actually, based on, I mean, who you are as an individual, some of your the dietary preferences, like the disease, the condition. It can actually put together all that on the fly, right? And it is literally final sort of like validation on the consumer part. I mean, do you agree with this card? Do you agree with, and the best part that is actually going on with the Kroger, and Sunanda, this is where Kroger is also the healthcare company, right? Like because of the food as a medicine is actually a big deal. I mean, within the Kroger, because we know, and we come from Indian culture where we know there are some inherent values of the food, right? In terms of like fighting disease, in terms of even curing some disease. So how do you actually surface all that and really help consumer while in the moments of truth, right? While they are actually looking for I think either some kind of inspiration, meal inspiration, or figuring out eating healthy on a budget. So yeah, I see a ton of opportunity, but I agree with all of you. I mean, we just scratched the surface, a ton of potential, but can we actually get this to a technical maturity where we can actually begin to do this at a scale?
Yeah, and I think I want to end that on that same agreement note that and share a personal thing that we did at CVS was around, like that was the goal, right? We wanted to build a full-fledged conversational agent or a virtual agent and have chats, because pharmacists are probably one of the most overworked folks in the country. So we wanted to figure out how to like take some of that pain away. And I think there are easier ways before going to that full-blown avatar agent that is appearing on the screen of a consumer. We did something basic, right? Like just take text messages, interpret them, have like modules that you just talk back to them within like that context. Even that simple like basic NLP and NLU can get you far in terms of getting that buy-in. And I might even say that even if you have the technology, go this way, because this gets your customer used to having those kind of interactions. And there is an element about customer education too on how to interact with the virtual agent, right? And this will help the brands really educate the customers so that when you as a business is ready, your consumers are also ready to like interact with that agent. So great thoughts, and want to segue into the next one given the time, because I think I don't want to miss out on some of the interesting topics here. So really want to go deep here into your experiences and understand about a time where you might have worked specifically on an AI use case for e-commerce and like the problem, the approach, etc. And I'm happy to start this one off from my stint at Wayfair, right? When I joined Wayfair, we had just started on that path of personalization and recommendation, right? We had the bare bones of the problem of like, how do I go about personalizing and picking the right products from 10,000 big catalog, like for each category had 10,000 products, right? So that is a very complicated machine learning problem if you try to attack the entire universe. So I think I go back to my mantra of like start simple. Even though you have your awesome neural net model that can do fantastic, like recommendation, which we did build towards the end. The way we started it was doing basic, right? Like just start coming up with basic popular products. You can't go wrong with that. Start showing that. That is like your first, you might not think that's personalization, but that is like what I call broad strokes personalization, right? Because you're collecting, crowdsourcing interests and sort of bringing it up to your consumer. Next level is that one-on-one or micro segment level personalization, for which you have all these techniques around. So we started there, built a very simple popularity-based one. Then we launched it, A/B tested it, made sure people were, receptive to it. Then launched the next generation of products, which started all the way from your typical collaborative filtering, content filtering, the usual ones around personalized recommendations, all the way to that neural net that I mentioned, right? So we were able to do this, but over a year, over 1.5 years, right? And I think to me, that experience has taught a lot in terms of anything that could go wrong will go wrong, right? So and especially with recommendation and personalization, as I mentioned already, it will backfire and it can really hurt your brand. So it's important to go in smaller steps, take the simplest one. It might not be the fanciest word you have seen in AI, but that is still pathway to AI. Like have that plan and have somebody who has the technical maturity to build that roadmap for the business. With that, hand it over to, I leave it to the room, whoever wants to go first and share your stories.
Yeah, I can go next, Sunanda. So yeah, Kroger actually, I have one specific example that has been actually a fascinating case study. People waste 130 billion pounds of food per year. Kroger believes it should be zero. So a couple of years ago, we created ChefBot as part of our Zero Hunger, Zero Waste initiative. ChefBot reimagines the cooking experience to make the most out of what's already in customers' fridge or pantry. ChefBot is a personalized smart recipe bot which uses visual AI to see nearly 2,000 ingredients and unlocks almost 20,000 recipes. So it has helped families make the most out of ingredients they already own and reduce the food waste, especially in the thick of pandemic. So this is how ChefBot works. It's still around, so feel free to actually take advantage. You simply take a picture of what you have in your pantry or fridge, tweet it, your photo with up to 3 ingredients. So one of the limitation of this, the initial, the use case was we could only do the visual sort of like the NLP only on the certain set of like ingredients. So take picture, tweet it to Kroger ChefBot, and ChefBot actually in real time actually comes back with a recipe recommendation. So as more people actually interact with it, the AI actually gets smarter, right? So we saw actually a huge success because people, they were stuck at home in the thick of pandemic. I mean, they started using it, right? Like, hey, what should I make, right? Like, just take a picture, tweet it to ChefBot, and they actually came back with the recipe recommendation. In terms of the key learning, I mean, as I said, it did have limitation. We could only do the visuals, sort of like the AI and the search, I mean, related to only certain the set of ingredient. We are now actually looking to scale this even further, add several additional capability in the area of like product categorization, substitution, replenishment, optimization, and at the end of the day, yeah, I think how do we make this visual search where you could take the picture of your entire pantry and entire fridge, and it can come back with like pretty sophisticated recommendation in terms of like what you should be making.
I'm definitely going to check that out because the number of times I've opened the fridge and stared at it and like, what do I make with all this stuff? I could totally use that time back. Over to you, Pavel.
Oh, yes. So yeah, I can probably share a recent example. Stepping at Nylas, I think probably kind of touching on what you were saying, Sunanda. We were working with a large multinational e-commerce player, and they have essentially a marketplace model, and they really wanted to kind of start on that first order personalization. I think as you were mentioning, right, they were having difficulties with just daily active users. Like, how do we get our users to even continually open our app every single day and get used to engaging with us, right? And so they really wanted that first order effect. And so they were looking at extracting first party data around ordering and shipping, just to present for account management perspectives. And so, we helped them through a whole flow of, managing that channel integration, that data flow, and, pre-filtering the data stream so that they could present that information immediately upon login. And so through that, they were able to, at least they originally deployed in the US, they achieved a 6 times conversion rate. And so from then they wanted to deploy to their European user base. And so we launched that in phases through several different countries. And so since then, this is probably in the last 6 months, they've added about 1.5 million users just from that, additional engagement piece. And so, and now now we're starting to explore a couple of, I think second order effects, as Sunanda was saying, was like, okay, now we have this customer data. Now they're interacting with our application. We're seeing more daily active users. How do we then use this, leverage this data to drive, repurchase, product recommendations, and things across the board. So yeah, I definitely would say echo Sunanda. I think especially a lot of organizations is really taking it in layers, but I think it's also a key missed part is often the customer relationship, right? It's how do you build that habit? How do you build that brand relationship? Because it's about changing habits for the consumer through this process.
Totally. Thanks so much, Pavel. And Roland, if you want to quickly wrap up with your comment.
Yeah, short and sweet, because a lot of people are thinking, okay, well, what does this mean for me fiscally, right? If I deploy some of these things, how much money should I invest? So my short anecdote, will be really short, is that we recently deployed a product discovery search navigation solution at I'll say a Wayfair-like organization. We deployed it in about a month. And after that, they were making $1 million more a day. So that's the kind of impact that deploying these type of technologies can do. And I'll leave it at that, short and sweet.
Thanks so much, Roland. And we can quickly wrap up this whole conversation. I hate to wrap it up because it's just a lot of fun, and I really hope we can catch up offline as well, because there's a lot to share here. I just want to do a quick wrap up here. If each of you can share one thing that you believe retailers should be doing today in terms of using AI in e-commerce, what would that be?
I can start first. Yeah, I can start first. So I definitely think that the lowest hanging fruit is really expanding beyond just the customer data that you have from your CRM, your ERP, your point of sale data, and really start building out that first party data strategy, right? I think with the shifting landscape, at the end of the day, that data, whether it powers your customer data platform, your data science platform, will activate a whole plethora of other use cases. And so I believe the lowest hanging fruit is making sure, I think Sunanda said in the beginning, is really having that governance in mind and just having that foundation so that then you can start carving out the appropriate use cases for your business.
Yeah, makes sense. Roland?
Well, I'm kind of a little biased, but I think that search is the highest intent to buy on any site. I think it is very low hanging fruit. You already have something today. It's probably not performing the way you want. There are vendors out there, and I'll just say vendors in generic, that can help solve this problem with AI and machine learning and personalization all wrapped into one thing. So I do think that's low hanging fruit. It's a month, 2 months of effort, and you can have some pretty big, like I had said, so that $1 million a day kind of thing, depending on your size. But again, I'm slightly biased.
Awesome. Sanjiv?
Yeah, my recommendation to all the retailers out there, start with your customer experience, right? Like, look at your journey, like who are your customers, the most valuable customers, the routine customers, what are they trying to get done, right? And once you have that, the entire journey sort of mapped out, you could now actually think where AI, personalization, machine learning, where is that actually gonna add value to make customer interaction more seamless, more personalized, more engaging. And I do actually recommend Gartner, not very far ago, probably 5 or 6 months ago, created the AI use case prism. So they already look at wealth of use cases, both from a business value perspective, as well as the feasibility, technical feasibility, the organizational feasibility. So there's already a ton of research related to, as you look at different like assortment, price optimization, customer recommendation, segmentation, what have you. There's already a ton of like research done in terms of what are those low-hanging fruit that are out there. And I totally agree with you, Roland. I mean, search, 70% of what we do, Kroger, I mean, is directly impacted by search. So yeah, I would strongly double down on that. Yeah, start with that, start with your customer journey, and try to see where AI actually makes the most value. So drives the most value.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I think I'm going to like try to condense all of that in a nugget if possible. But essentially what we heard was focus on your data, right? Like both the first party and make sure you have robust ways of expanding it or like getting more, because that is your foundation. And the second, like start simple. Like you don't like, while yes, as an organization, you need to embrace AI because it's very useful. Start simple. It might not sound like AI, but doing the simplest methods of personalization will be a big lift. And honestly, every time we have tried to start from scratch, you never see those kind of lift percentages. Like no matter how much you fine tune later, that big bump is always the first one when you have no personalization, and then you do a simple thing like, just choose the right channel on which you talk to your customers. Done. Like that in itself will be a big thing. And tied with that, search, right? Like for any retailer who has like a big catalog, I think you need to focus the attention of your customer, get them while they are looking at you, make sure you're showing relevance, right? Like, and that is important. And I think search and search related methods do it fantastically. So thank you so much. This was a great conversation. And I think hopefully the audience learned a whole ton and are able to take away some interesting tidbits for their own day-to-day life.
Thank you so much. Sunanda, thank you so much for moderating. And Pavel, Sanjiv, Roland, thank you for sharing these incredible insights. This has been an amazing group. And I know this virtual audience is going wild with virtual applause. Thank you again. You guys have been amazing today. And for the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and take some time to check out our awesome exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.